Welcome back, my children. Please have a seat and get comfortable. Today we have another tale from our good friend Kit Williamson. A tale reminding us of the horrors that lurk in the darkness, and of those that lurk in the hearts of those close to us. Please enjoy our little presentation of The Thing in the Woods. You would think that I, as a young man, would have learned my lesson much sooner when it came to engaging in activities with my brother. However, youth does not always see things the same way as we do once we grow up, and the love for family can often skew your own beliefs of what should or shouldn't be allowed. Keep in mind, I am not trying to tell anyone that they should never trust their family, simply that sometimes family puts us in dangerous or toxic situations, and we fail to realize it until much later in life. I doubt you are here to explore the family dynamic of my life, however. No, you are most likely here for another tale from my more than supernaturally disturbing portion of life. It just so happens that in many cases the two merge quite closely to each other. It was a warm summer day when my brother and I left out on our bicycles to explore the forests close to home. There have always been a plethora of trails that lead back and forth, crisscrossing the woods like an earthen spiderweb along the forest floor, and we would often follow them. The memories of our jaunts along these paths are some of the few fond memories I have of the thing I used to call my brother. I was always the one following him as he led deeper into the forest, beams of sun occasionally shining down onto us through the forest canopy above. On this day, we stopped by a small cattle pond. The muddy clay banks were surrounded by a small clearing in the forest, sun shining down and warming them. It was at this point that our casual conversation turned to the famous escape artists such as Harry Houdini and the like. We mused for hours on how exactly he was able to enact his amazing feats, but neither of us ever truly understood it. From discussing their exploits, it naturally led to a discussion on how we would escape similar, or even more mundane, situations. We decided then to test each other's escape skills, as he had just happened to bring along a length of rope. I was always eager to try and impress my brother at that age, as his opinion meant a lot to me, but was rarely positive. So it was with this mindset that led me to agree to be the first escapist in our competition. Sitting down in front of a tall pine, facing the pond, I placed my hands behind my back as he instructed. He began to wrap my wrists together, not tight enough to cut off circulation, but enough so that any movement caused the rope to dig into my skin. Ignoring my protests about the rope's tightness, he then wrapped it behind the tree and brought it back to the front. He then secured my legs tightly as he had with my hands, with multiple loops wrapped around both before pushing me against the tree and wrapping several coils around my chest and the tree. Tying the ends of the rope behind it, he examined each and every knot to ensure that they weren't going to come off easily. Then, with a smile, a laugh, and a wave, he got onto his bicycle and began to ride off, listening to my angry protestations and laughing louder as his distance grew further. It was at this point that I came to realize that this had been his plan all along. The fact he had a rope with him was no coincidence. He had fully intended on leaving me out here alone in the wilderness since before we even left on our adventure. How long he had been planning this I have no idea, but I knew that I had to get out on my own because there was no help coming. I spent several minutes wildly flailing against the ropes that bound me, screaming in frustration at my own foolishness and the devious evil of my brother. This quickly tired me out, and slowly, ever so slowly, I began to calm down and stop my futile struggle against my bindings. Only after I had ceased my protestations was I able to hear the sound coming from the pond in front of me. It started off as a low, bubbling sound, with the surface of the pond rippling with soft wavelets, bubbles popping at the surface as if some air pocket had been released. Then, with a loud gurgling pop, a large bubble rose to the surface, causing a large rush of waves to splash onto the muddy banks. I started to struggle against the ropes again, pulling on my wrists, the rough strands of the rope digging deeper and harder into them. The water began to erupt into a tumultuous fury, the waves sloshing over the edge into the grass around it, almost coming to my feet. A dark shape was just barely visible beneath the rolling surface, ponderously moving towards the edge. From that edge, a broad, flat surface began to arise. Water and mud dripped off the sides of it, splashing into the pond. On the sides of the mud-dripping platform, 2 giant orbs opened. Eyes as large as a dinner plate, swirling brown colors mixing around a gigantic pupil. It continued to slide its way forward, the water continuing to churn like a boiling pot of oatmeal, spewing debris and slush further along the banks. With another pop sound, the creature making its way out of the muck opened a gigantic, toothless maw, releasing a thunderous croaking sound. First one, then another slimy webbed foot slapped onto the bank, scattering sludge with each step. A long, slime-dripping tongue fell out of its mouth and moved around like a serpent, seeking, searching. Seeing this abomination emerge, panic struck my body. Struggling viciously against the ropes, kicking my legs against the bindings, every muscle in my body straining to be free and escape from this place. The snake-like tongue continued to creep closer, touching my shoe, then retracting with a squelch. My shoe going along with it into the maw of the amphibious creature. As I squirmed to get free from my bonds, my hand happened to fall into what could only be my salvation. Tucked in the back of my belt lived my reliable pocket knife. Gripping it with sweat-slickened hands, I almost dropped it several times before finally managing to flip it open. I began to saw at the ropes when I noticed that the slimy appendage once more slid forth from the cavernous maw, moving much more directly in my direction this time than it was before. Freeing my arms first, I set to upon my legs, cutting furiously through the cheap rope. Just as I was beginning to cut the rope that was binding my torso against the tree, the tongue reached me. Quickly, it wrapped around my leg like a constrictor, sliding around up to my knee and jerking me backwards. If it wasn't for the rope still wrapped around my torso, this would have been the end of me. But luckily, they held, keeping me against the tree as my leg was yanked hard, causing me to scream in pain. On instinct, I took my pocket knife and slammed it down through the layers of slime and muscle gripping me. With an indignant and enormous croak, the thing released me, yanking that tongue back into its mouth and taking my knife with it. Before it could recover, I slid my back up the tree, the rope sliding down to my legs and letting me step out of them. With nary a thought, I tried running away into the woods, limping on the leg the thing had grabbed, but my speed was very much slowed by this injury. Constantly, I glanced over my shoulder, watching as those eyes and tongue searched again to find me before locking onto my fleeing form. With a croak and a hiss, that tongue sailed out again, stopping with a crack feet behind me, then falling onto the forest floor. I continued to make my hasty way through the woods, listening to the crunch and rustle of leaves behind me as the tongue retracted again. It took me hours to limp my way back home. Clothes torn, bicycle lost, covered in mud and slime. Bleeding and exhausted, I stumbled up the stairs to the laughter of my brother and a concerned look from my parents. Not saying a word, I shoved my way inside, leaving a trail of muck down the hallway as I went. The water never got warm enough, or the soap clean enough, to scrub away the feeling of that tongue or the slime that came with it. I washed, scrubbing my skin raw, and scrubbed myself over and over until the hot water ran out of supply. Still feeling the disgust and corruption from my experience, I dressed in my pajamas and slumped into bed, refusing to say a word to anyone for the rest of the evening. Never have I revisited that part of the woods, even to go and retrieve my bicycle, whether it was still there or not. My parents sent my brother out to go find it, and he came back empty-handed. Whether this was from incompetence, indifference, or inability, he never retrieved it. To this day, deep water terrifies me. Who knows what things lurk hidden under the muck and cloudy water? What horrors, long undiscovered, may still exist in these places man rarely, if ever, comes across. Trust, my children, once lost is not an easy thing to recover. But somehow we find ourselves forgiving our family and wishing they could change. Sometimes the true monsters aren't what goes bump in the night, but what goes knocking on our door. That is all our time for tonight, children. Sleep well and dream of horrors unknowable. Good night, children, and stay creepy, my fiends.